Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third Bevy Meetup. I'm so happy to be here again and having you guys in the audience. You know the drill, but let me quickly pull up the intro presentation of this meetup. I think we skipped over this last time. Not this time, though. So we're going to have two amazing speakers today. We're going to try to aim for a 15 to 20 minute presentation each with five minutes of Q&A. And there's going to be, again, a live Q&A board over on Live Ask. Just follow the QR code or use the link in the description. The videos, the presentations will be recorded and live streamed again. So if you missed out the event, no worries. There will be individual recordings of the presentations afterwards again. And yeah, a few words to our code of conduct, pretty typical Rust stuff. Be kind, be respectful, be curious, and reach out to me if you or us if you have any concerns or anything that you want to share. Who am I? I'm Stefan. I'm using Rust since 2017. Working and participating in the game development ecosystem for 17 years. I created the Git UI tool in Rust and Live Ask, which you can use for this event too. And yeah, my newest company, Rust Unit, is sponsoring this event. So if you have any interest in what we are doing, follow the website, check it out, and reach out to me. Here's the QR code to the Q&A platform again on Live Ask. So scan it, rush over there, point your questions there. If you post something into the chat, I try to pick it up, but I can't guarantee for anything. It's a kind of a multitasking event here going on. So yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna pull up Julian, our first speaker, on stage. Let me quickly do that. And we're going to hear his presentation about animation blending. And I'm super excited. I think he's incorporated the newest animation blending features. But yeah, let's see what he has to show. Julian, welcome.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Stefan, for organizing this meetup and inviting me there. So, yep, today we'll talk about animating 3D characters with Bevy. I didn't incorporate the animation graph yet, but I tried, and there are some bugs, but it will be planned for 0.14. But I will talk about it. So my name is Julian. I'm a software developer, and I also enjoy game dev. 5 months ago, I started a new project, 3D project, with a 3D character, a samurai slashing bad guys. So I needed some animations. But I don't have animation skills yet. I'm still learning, and I'm still modelizing my character. So I decided to go with some dummy characters. This one, saying hi, is coming from Mixamo that I use for prototyping my game. You have high definition characters, a lot of different characters, and high definition animations. I really recommend this website if you want to have some animations. You can download the character and the animations, and you will get an FBX file. So you need to generate a GLTF file, which is the format supported by Bevy. I will not dive too much into this process. There is a video, Smooth Animations with Bevy I made, if you're interested. But quickly, what you do is just you import the armature, which is the skeleton and the different bones from the character. Also, the animation from Mixamo to Blender, so an FBX file that you import. Then you will edit the animations, maybe the keyframes, disable some of them, enable some of them. And then you will export a GLTF file. So this file is supported by Bevy and also Blender. And you can export a binary format, but if you're curious and you need to inspect the file, you can check the human readable format, and you will see that you have everything about your 3D model. The keyframes, the animations in our case, the vertex skinning, so the bones, the weight of the bones will influence the vertex, and also the meshes of your character, and you will have much more like materials, texture. You can learn about GLTF with this repository coming from Kronos Group. So we'll directly dive into Bevy Animation Crate. We talk about the low-level API, and I will make parallels with Blender so you can understand visually how it works, not only code, but also some visuals. So the first enumeration I need to talk about is keyframes, because we can't talk about animations without any keyframe. So this enumeration offers three different variants. The last one, wait, I will not talk about it because I didn't try, but it's for morph targets. So for example, for facial expressions and stuff like this. But I will only focus on rotation, translation, and scale. Those three variants will have a bunch of keyframes that you can put. For example, you want to rotate the head bone of your character. In that case, we just provide a bunch of quaternions. Quaternions are used for rotation. And each keyframe will hold the value for the specified rotation you want. So let's say, for example, you want to rotate by 30 degrees, you can have different rotations to achieve it. Then those keyframes will be used in a variable curve. In Bevy, we talk about variable curve, but in Blender, we have F curves. Those are different naming conventions, but it's quite the same. So the variable curve will be a way to define how you play the different keyframes, how you play the animation. So we need timestamps. Each keyframe will be spread over a specific timestamp. So it will be frame dependent. Most of the time we'll have one keyframe per frame. And this keyframe will hold some information and will interpolate the two keyframes. So for example, you have linear, step, and cubic spline interpolation methods that you can use to interpolate from one keyframe to another. So we can create all the different steps between two keyframes. It will just avoid to have issues like defining all the different keyframes. You can just have a gap between them, and the engine, like Blender or Bevy, will just provide all the different parts. This is the view from Blender. So at the very top, you see the character that is withdrawing the sword, and you can see the skeleton with the X-ray view. And then you have this graph editor where you can see the different curves that are being used and the different keyframes, those dots that you see. And you will play the animation, and over time you play the different keyframes. And you have for each keyframe an interpolation method that is applied. And on the right, you can see that we have a bunch of bones that are defined for the armature. Each bone in Bevy will be considered as a component where you can just add different properties. Like you want to rotate this, I don't know, the head, for example, or the hips. When you run, you can translate and you can scale. Then once you have the curve, you need an animation clip that will wrap all this information and also describe which components will be animated. So as you can see, the first information is the curves, and then you have the path. Each entity path is a path to your bone, for example, depending on what you animate, but in case of character, you have bones. And it will have a specific duration. Then you have the animation transition. This one is used when you want to smoothly transition from one animation to another, and will just decrease the current weight of this animation, and it will be faded out to be replaced by a new animation. And now we will start to talk about the high-level API. Once you exported the GLTF file, that's what you will use, the animation player. So you can control the different animation clips in your game. You can, for example, repeat an animation, you can pause, resume, and you can start or play with transition, and you have many more methods. So now let's use this high-level API and provide some example about playing animations. This is what I use for my character. So I will have a demonstration. It will be maybe a bit better to explain how it works, but we'll dive into the code first. So I use enumerations because it's quite difficult to know which animation you are playing if you just use indexes coming from the GLTF file. So I decided to use a summary animation with different variants. Each variant will be a U8 representation. So for example, idle will be 0, withdrawing 1, slashing 2, and so So it will be very expressive, easier to read in the code than indexes, but still you need those indexes to load the specific animation. So I derived an emitter, which provide a way to just iterate over the variants, and for each variant you get the U8 representation, and then you can use it to load the specific animation, and then you will collect them. You will get a vector of animation clips, which are handles, and you will insert the resources. As a quick note, I use enumerations coming from the Livestream input manager. So you have this action light trait. You can use it to just bind all the different inputs to a specific variant of an enumeration. So here I have a samurai action. I have the attacking variant, which will be binded to the mouse button left in case of a mouse keyboard setup, and to the west button of a gamepad button. So for the same variant, you have two different bindings in this case, which is very handy and very expressive too. Very quickly, I have a graph representation. This is not the underlying implementation of my game, but just a way to have a mental model of how it works. So if we start with the default animation, the hidden animation, which is a node, I will transition to withdrawing. To transition, I need to have a specific condition. The mod needs to be passive, because you can't withdraw a sword if you're already fighting. It means you already have your sword. So from idle to withdrawing, you need to be in a passive mode. You need to click on mouse 1, and you will mutate the state to an attack mode. And the same will be applied for slashing, but the slashing animation has the specificity of being repeated if you click on mouse 1. But you can also have external events. I didn't implement any of them, but that's just some ideas. For example, you could have damages in case you want to automate everything. For example, let's say you have an enemy that is starting to attack you. You are in idle mode. Then maybe you can automatically start to withdraw the sword and start to slash the enemies. Or maybe you don't have any user input, and for 2 minutes you decide to just sheath the sword, and then you will go back to the idle mode automatically. So this is what I would like to have a state machine at the end. It's not yet implemented. And then we need to play the animations. How do we do this? We have systems in Bevy, and there is the system specific for animations, my samurai animations in my case. And I decided to use a local variable using my enumeration samurai animation to track the current animation in the system. This is just specific to the system, so it will not be used outside. And it will be helpful to just decide which animation I need to play. And then I also have the player mode, passive or armed, that will help me to just decide if I should withdraw or slash the enemies. Here's a very simple example. You can repeat an animation. In my case, it was for the hidden animation. So you can see that I use the repeat function, but you also add this play with transition. The reason is if I'm running or if I'm attacking and I want to go back to the hidden mode, then I want to smoothly transition between the animations. So this function is offering this possibility. Then a more complex example. There I have an attack that is being listened for the player input. And I will decide based on the player mode if I should slash or withdraw. In case, I have 3 cases: withdrawing, slashing, simple slash, or slashing multiple times. When you are in a game and you have enemies, you would just spam the attack button and you try to just kill all the enemies. But you don't necessarily want to play each time the same animation. You just want to let it finish enough to get the feedback for the user. If you spam the attack, you will get the same keyframe be played over and over, and it will be very hard to see what's going on. So I prevented the spam attack by checking the seek time. You have this function that will allow you to just check where you are in the animation. In my case, 0.7, yes, was working correctly. So you go from 0 to the duration of the animation clip. So if I'm more than 0.7, I will use this function start with transition. This one will allow me to just replay the same animation, but I just transition. For example, I slash, and then at the middle of the attack, I stop it, and I will slash again. It will help me to just have a very good feedback for the user when I attack. But in the case I'm below the 0.7 information, so the condition is below 0.7, I will just play with transition, but because this function doesn't play the same animation if it's already playing, it will just prevent, to replay the animation, and we let it finish. And in case I'm withdrawing the sword, this function will also take it into consideration, because I just need to play it from the first frame to the last frame. This is demo time now. I have just a simple game with an isometric view. This is what I'm working on actively. I have an isometric view and isometric movements for my character. There is the run animation. And if I stop, it will just transition to the dead state. Then I can also use my gamepad there. I can do the same, but I also have some implementation to improve, because as you can see, if I just move just quickly, it will not transition correctly. I need to fix this. And I can also withdraw the sword and start to attack. If we just use the perspective camera, it will be just easier to see. So as you can see, I can just spam the button, but the animation will not be spamming. Still, I can play multiple times the same animation. And I can just sheath the sword. And I go back to the idle mode. This is using the current implementation 0.13, but as you can see, if I run and at the same time I decide to attack, this is very weird, right? This is because I don't have a way to play two animations at the same time, just trying to transition from one animation to the other one and never playing the animations together. I need to run and attack at the same time. So for this, I will need the animation graph, which will be in the 0.14 version of Bevy. It will have a root node, and each node could be something that you blend. You will be able to define how much you want to blend. And you can create this blend mode. This is what I will need, and I will have the attack animation and run animation blended together. But that's not really enough, because if you want to really have a smooth animation, we need to, at the upper body, playing the attack animation and the bottom body running. It will be just a bit better. And I don't think Bevy supports, for the moment, layer mask. This is what Unity does, for example. I don't know for other engines. And this is my experiment with the animation graph. I was experimenting, trying to add it for my game for this talk, but it didn't work. And I have a bug. I reported a bug to the repository. So currently we have one animation that is not transitioned correctly. If I play multiple times the slash animation, we see that we are decreasing in the weight, but it doesn't fade out correctly. I don't know. It just doesn't play the animation. So we still need a fix. Future plans, what I envision, I already talked about it just a bit, but an animation state machine representation, which will be helpful to debug, to have something a bit more complex where I have nodes and transitions with the edges. A layer mask, maybe I can try to implement it, or maybe it will be planned for Bevy. And an in-game animation inspector. Blender is enough for that, but when you have hitboxes and outboxes, then what you want to do is just to pause the animation and see how the animation will affect the hitboxes and outboxes to just debug this. And this is what I will try to implement next. So that's all for this talk. Thank you for listening. And now it's question time.
Hey, Julian, thanks so much. Amazing talk. I think I confused the animation graph that is not out yet with what we talked about and what you use already in there. Sorry for that confusion.
Yeah, no problem. I was trying to implement it, to be honest, but because of this bug, it prevented me to just continue. So I have the implementation, but it doesn't work yet.
Yeah. Okay, we have a few questions. Let's look into that. How does the blending between two animations work? Is it something that I define in the GLTF file?
Well, it depends where you define the blending, because you can do it, I think, directly with Blender. But no, this is Bevy who is doing the blending, and currently just fading out the current animation to the next one. I think there is some blending at some point, but I didn't try to manipulate directly the low-level API. So everything you saw there is directly in the high-level API.
Okay. Yeah, the classic, what kind of game is it that you're working on?
Well, it will be a voxel game, but for the moment, I have some kind of placeholder for the samurai and stuff like that, so I can try to implement. But it's a voxel game with the samurai, a bit like Hades. You get a random room and you slash enemies and bosses.
Amazing. So, any time frame for that one?
What? No, I
Any
don't
time
have
frame?
any. No.
When it's done. Okay.
It will
I
be a longer
guess,
run.
yeah, I guess this was answered before. The blending between animations is not released yet, right? Or is
Yeah.
blending something that works? It's just
Yeah,
not the graph that doesn't work yet.
Yeah, the graph will offer a way to configure the blending in programmatically or directly with a specific file, but it's not yet implemented. But you have some blending done directly in Blender currently, but I don't have all the technical details.
Okay, and you mentioned a separate file format for the animation graph. Is that something, so you can basically put these different weights and everything into a run or some file like that?
Yeah, a run file where you can define all the specifics for blending and create your own nodes.
Yeah. So this next one hooks into a classic issue with such a everything ECS style application. I would say it is using a local for the animation playing. It could be manipulated elsewhere, correct? And therefore getting out of sync. I guess that's not just for this specific use case a problem, but if you use a local for something like that, then you could still have other systems picking it up somewhere else, triggering an animation, and your local wouldn't be in sync anymore, right?
Yeah, the way I understood local is just specific to one system, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
For me, just this system that will have access to the local variable, and if you not be manipulating.
Yeah, but I guess the point is that you could have this system thinking some specific animation state is running because that's what the local says, but some other system could just have hooked into the animation player and just triggered whatever.
Oh yeah,
right?
definitely. Yeah, if you have multiple systems for the same animation.
Yeah. Okay. I see using hard-coded time offsets for transitions like the greater 0.7. Is that something that can be picked up from the GLTF, like markers?
Honestly, I don't know. For me, it's just coming from. So you have the current implementation low-level API is just playing over time based on the animation clip duration. So you can change the duration, but I don't think you can have a marker or something like this. I don't see the link between two. This is just Bevy playing the animation clip and the duration decreasing or changing based on your of what you do with the API.
Yeah, but I guess you could have animations that transitions. I mean, that are depending on what happens in the animation, right? And then you would have the times to be synchronized with what is defined in the animation in the Blender file.
Oh, yeah, you could certainly define something like this, but I don't know for GLTF. But definitely, yeah, could be achieved. That's what I would like to do with the state state machine.
Okay. Last question. how is it to work with a part of Bevy that is such a moving target and actively worked on? Are you permanently on master?
Well,
And I
no.
personally would add, how do you start with animations in your project? Like, how is this the first thing?
Yeah, for me, animations are everything in the game. So if you have animation, you get the feedback. If you get the feedback, you can play test very early your game. And I was able, thanks to the Livestream Input Manager too, to test it on Steam Deck with the gamepad controller and mouse keyboard. But how do I keep up with the Bevy? I don't. That's why I'm still in the official version, not the dev version. But when I tried, the issue is you need to also update your plugins, and it's very difficult because you need to, just use a specific version of Bevy and update the version in the plugins and update the code just to try it. So more plugins you have, and most difficulties you will find to just try a specific version. So I don't try it too hard. I tried for the animation graph because I needed to just experiment. But yeah, definitely, I don't try to keep up with all the updates. I just wait.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, especially the what you make with the plugins. That can be a nightmare, especially when you then want to go on master and some stuff is not up to date with some recent change yet.
Yeah.
Yep, Julian, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's see if there's more questions popping up throughout the event. Maybe we can have a little panel discussion at the end again. I'm definitely looking forward to see you around later again. And
Yeah, okay.
I hope you have good. You will make good progress on the project. I'm keen to see what's happening there. So keep us posted.
Yeah, I do live stream, so definitely at least one per week.
Yeah.
You'd show the game.
Cool, Julian. Thank you. So that was our first one. I'm going to pull up Niklas pretty soon, and we're going to have the second presentation today about the famous Bevy game template, I would say. I definitely have, since I discovered it, I've used it for any game at the beginning. So I'm very excited to hear his learnings throughout the development process of that. So let's give a big hand for Niklas. Hey, Niklas.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me.
Here are your slides. Cool. So give it away.
Thank you, Stefan. So as already introduced by Stefan, I'm going to talk about the Bevy game template. And first of all, this is a screenshot from GitHub. So it is a public template on GitHub. It has this fancy green button on the top right. Use this template. You can just click it. You get your own repository based on the template. The whole idea is to have a third-party starting point for any kind of Bevy application. And I started this beginning of 2021 because I was joining game jams, and I pretty quickly noticed that I had to copy a lot of boilerplates every time I joined a new jam. I spent a lot of time on things outside of actually developing a game. So I tried to cut down on that. I had 3 points that I focused on. The first one was I wanted this to be cross-platform, because the more platforms you support, the more people can play your game, the more ratings and feedback you get. I wanted it to be as much automated as possible. So I wanted a lot of CI/CD. I wanted some workflows running on GitHub, building and bundling everything for me. And I wanted it to be extendable. This point is pretty easy with Bevy, I would actually say. I just didn't want the template to be in the way in case my 2-day, 3-day little game jam project was so nice, so fun to work with that I continue working on it and it would grow a bit. So that was the starting point. And I am going to quickly show you what the repository itself looks like, just so you have a rough overview. So I have it checked out here. We have the workflows. We will talk more about them later. There is the assets directory that you all know with some image files in it and some audio files in this case. The build directory is specific for the CD pipelines. So there's a bunch of files in here for some platforms that require some configurations and some special icon formats and so on. The credits directory, you can put some information like licenses for dependencies and so on. It will be automatically included in any packaged version of your game later on. Then the mobile, this is a crate actually. This is the entry point for Android and iOS, which need a little bit more special setup compared to the other platforms. So this has its own crate. SRC is the top level crate really. So here we have the entry point for the desktop platforms and the web platform. Then we have a lib file and we have a bunch of modules. So this is where you will actually write code and put like your own modules and plugins into. That's about it. So we will go into more detail on the following slides. So I'm going to look at these 3 focus points here: cross-platform, CI/CD, extendable, and I will try to pull some learnings out of every one of these points. I hope there's something interesting for everyone here. First point, cross-platform setup. So what I mean by that is that I wanted to support all the official Bevy platforms. In the beginning, that was, at least the ones I considered in the beginning, it was Linux, Windows, Mac, and web. And for a year now or so, roughly, the template also supports Android and iOS. So at the moment, it's 6 different platforms. You already saw the folder with the platform-specific files for packaging. I find this is the nicest way of organizing them inside this repository, so they're not cluttering everything else. And I try to have a minimal structure. So while I support 6 platforms, some of them have some special needs, mostly the mobile ones. So it made sense to split into 2 crates, but I didn't want to go into more than that. So for the cross-platform setup, there's a lot you have to do in CI/CD. But what I wanted to focus on here for learnings was things that you have to do in code and that Bevy doesn't really help you with, at least not yet. So it's 2 small things I wanted to mention there. The first one is just in case you can't actually play things on Windows. So if you just work on Linux like me, you might not know that if you run your game later on Windows, you will always get a terminal opening up from your executable. Most likely this is not what you want in your game, and it's really easy to fix. I have also linked the cheat book on these slides, and there's going to be a link to the slides later in the description or in the YouTube chat, so you can just click on the link. You don't have to remember it. The cheat book has a lot of good information on different platforms. The second point is about icons. Now, there's a lot of icons you're going to want to set. I'm not talking about the ones maybe your players see inside the games. I'm talking about the ones that are around it. So for example, the icon of the executable or an icon on the window. In some cases, things like the favicon, for example, you have to set when you actually build your game for a certain platform. But in the case of the executable icon for Windows, and in the case of the taskbar and the window icon for Windows and X11 Linux, this is something you need to configure inside code. So for the first point, for the executable icon, it will be a build file. You can take a look at the game template to actually look at the code of the build file or at the cheat book. And in the case of the window icon for taskbar or like in the corner of the window, this is something that has been attempted to be configurable through Bevy a couple of times. I'm aware of some issues and some pull requests, but as far as I know, nothing has been merged yet, and we have to drop down 1 level in the API. So we need to directly talk to the dependencies of Bevy. So in this case here, this window is actually not a Bevy window, it's a Vinit window. And onside the window, you can call this function set window icon. Again, this is something you can find in the templates and on the cheat book if you want to see the code. Okay, so those were 2 learnings to maybe be aware of for cross-platform support. Now let's go to CI/CD, or as I call it here in the title, automate what you can. This is just a very general learning, just automate wherever you can. And especially if you do things like game jams, it's really, really helpful to not have to worry about builds, because at least for me, I usually get very stressed out at the end anyways, but then there's no time left to really care about getting working builds for all your targets. On the right, you can see the workflow directory of the template. There's 5 YAML files in there. First of all, we have a simple CI pipeline. So this is a CI YAML. It will just do things like check the format, check linting, run cargo tests in case you have unit tests. The template doesn't really have any logic, so there are no unit tests, but you might have some. Then the next kind of pipeline is the release YAML, which builds release for all 6 platforms. So if this workflow runs, at the end, you get a release on GitHub with 6 files attached to it. Most of them are some kind of archives, and one per platform. The web one and Linux, Windows, and Mac ones, they are just, well, you can directly distribute them. You can just upload them to itch.io and they will just work. The 2 mobile platforms are a little bit special because for you to be able to release them on the store, you need to have accounts. You need to configure a bunch of secrets. The accounts are actually paid, right? You need to pay to get access to the developer program for Google and for Apple. So for those, I have some special separate workflows. Those are the release Android and release iOS ones. I have some blog posts describing how to set them up. They are linked on the slide here. So in case you want to configure those, you need to have the developer accounts for the platform and then go through the blog posts. It takes a couple of minutes. The mobile platforms are still a little bit more complicated than the other ones. On to the last point, extendable. Now, the first thing here, in my opinion, is to just use Bevy plugins, like really, really use Bevy plugins, order everything into them. This is the first level of code organization. Organize your things into plugins and then combine your plugins to a top level one. I have had really good experience with that kind of code structure. The second one is if you have some Bevy plugins in your game that don't really have dependencies, they don't change often, you might want to consider to move them into a separate crate. And just to make this like a tiny, tiny bit easier, the game template is already a workspace. So you just have to add the name of the crate to the workspace section and you're good to go. And then the final, and in my opinion, the most important point here is how do you actually organize your code into plugins? So how do you decide what goes into what plugin? And here, I would say organize it by domain. Something that works also very well for things like microservices, in case anybody of you is working in that domain. But it's the same way that Bevy organizes plugins internally. And this is also the way, in my opinion, to go when you're writing a game using Bevy. I've seen some other ways of organizing things, like having a systems.rs file or resources.rs file and then put them all in there. I really don't like this. I don't think it scales well. And I'm going to show you one more thing about why I think this is a really good way to go. First of all, what this means in the case of the template is if we look at the files again, we have the lib and the main file. Then we have audio.rs, loading.rs, menu.rs, and player.rs. Those are really the domains. So the audio.rs will only care about audio. Loading will only care about asset loading. Menu and player, the same thing. As an example, if we look at the code in audio.rs, there's only one public item in here, and that's the plugin itself. Then we add some other plugins. So this could be Bevy Audio, or in this case, it's Bevy Kira Audio. Same thing, we need to add this audio plugin. We have 2 systems, we have a resource, they are all not exported. And outside of this module, all we do is we import internal audio plugin, we add it to our app, and our game has audio. Now, as a second example, don't look too close at the functions here. This is Bevy 0.5, like somewhere beginning of 2021, I think. This is the old code of the Bevy game template in the loading RS file. So this plugin is intended to handle all the asset loading. We have 3 resources. We have 2 systems. The idea is we have this game state, and during the game state variant loading, we want to start loading all our assets. we keep track of them, and when they're all loaded, we continue down here in the second state to the game state menu. In general, this pattern of a loading state during which you load all the assets, I found really nice. I wanted to work with this. But this code here was not nice to use, because whenever I had to add a new asset, I have to change this field or this line here. I have to change this system. I have to add another field to this resource. I might have to add another resource here with its own field and add it in both of these systems. Most of the time, you even have another place to change because you don't want to duplicate the file names, right? Right now here, I have this duplicated. I would move this to some kind of variable that also needs to be changed. And you see, this is a bunch of red lines. You don't want to have to do this. So I decided to move this into an external crate and iterate on the API. And since this was already cut by domain, this was really a copy paste. I created a new project, a new cargo project. I copy pasted this whole thing in it, created a little example, and then started iterating on the API. And what I want to say with this is when you see something like this, when you see any kind of pattern and you have everything already sorted by domain, consider moving it into a different crate, consider sharing it with people. This was the birth of Bevy Asset Loader. Basically, after a couple of iterations, I had a derive macro which hides most of this boilerplate and makes it really, really easy to implement loading states. So use exactly this pattern without all the red lines where you need to change things whenever you add a new asset. So with Bevy Asset Loader, this is what loading AS looks like now in the template. In the plugin, we really just configure a loading state. We say, this is our state. We want to go here. We want to load those two resources. Whenever I want to add a new asset, I just need to change a single resource. I basically add two lines next to each other, one time define the file name, one time define the type of the handle, and I'm good to go. That would be it from me.
Well, that was unexpected. I was surprised that it's over.
I don't
Niklas,
have
thank you so much.
Finished slide.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. All good. Really nice presentation, and I'm happy that you also were able to point out the asset loader, because that's obviously something else that I'm using a lot, and that I'm happy that it's already integrated into the template, because then it makes it also super easy to keep using it. So glad to see that here. And yeah, thanks again from myself, but also from a lot of other people, I'm pretty sure, for maintaining this template and making it super easy to get started in game jams and with Bevy projects in general. And also because it's sort of visualizes some of the best practices right away, right? It's like it's the best tutorial because it's getting into my project for free.
Thank you.
So, Niklas, there's a bunch of questions. Let's get started. Do you plan to support other pipeline providers such as GitLab?
No, I haven't really thought about that, to be honest. I'm not sure how close GitLab pipelines are to GitHub ones. So maybe it would be easy to just migrate them, but I don't know.
I think it's very different. But
then
might have changed.
I haven't really used GitLab in many years. I don't think I ever used had a pipeline on GitLab, so I'm not sure what that would mean then. And the thing is, this really started as a GitHub template, right? I showed you the easy button. So at the moment, I think this is pretty much bound to GitHub. But if somebody would take, I mean, the license is CC0, right? It should be pretty simple to just base something on the pipelines. And there's also a bunch of other templates with CI/CD pipelines like Foxtrot, or also the official Bevy CLI template.
Yeah,
maybe one could look at those.
That's true. I just come up now that you mentioned CLI. Is there actually also a way to make this like a CLI tool as well to generate new Bevy projects, like a Bevy CLI, to spawn that and use your project for that?
Yes, there is a way to, there's multiple tools that can do that, right? You can kind of build templates and then have the CLI that loads it from GitHub or for some other repository URL and then replaces parts in it. And I actually experimented with that. I think a while ago there was an issue open on Bevy Game Template about this. I decided against it at that moment because it just makes it harder to look at the code and directly run it. So I would always have to check out the code with the CLI tool to generate an actual working project.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, in theory, that would be really helpful and something useful.
Yeah. Okay, I think the next one you kind of answered in your talk already. Recommended folder file structure for source code, how to structure components, systems, resources. I guess the answer is domain driven and not like systems into a folder or module and resources in one and such. Do you have more thoughts on that?
I mean, it's at least my opinion. I would be glad to hear other opinions and discuss it, but this is what I have come to use. And so far, I've had the best experience with this kind of code organization, yes.
Could you imagine any advantage of doing it the other way around?
Not
does it really just
no.
taste? Yeah.
I mean, maybe it's a little bit simpler when you have less files or, but honestly, I'm so used to this by now that it's automatic.
Yeah. Okay, cool. How can someone find the credits in a bundled iOS app? I guess not.
Yes. No. This is just one small step. Yeah. This is not what would. I don't think it would be enough for really a published game on Steam, right? You probably want to show the credits from the game menu or something like that. That is not implemented in the template. It's just that the license files and so on are distributed, which I guess is also one of the things you need to do, right? You will have to distribute license files from your dependencies.
So it really just makes sure that we have it in the binary results somewhere if someone were to search for it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. As long as you keep this credits directory up to date, of course.
Yeah. That's a good point. Isn't there also a cargo tool for that? I'm blanking now that helps extracting that stuff.
Yeah, there is a tool. I think it can build like a combined license. So it goes through all your dependencies and the dependencies of dependencies and scrapes them all together. But that's not.
Did you look into using that?
Not really. I've looked at the tool, but I haven't integrated it so far.
Okay. Does it apply caching between builds to reduce the times?
Yes, I tried. It is currently, so if you look into the workflows, there is a cache configured. I've had quite some issues with it, actually. The workers on GitHub tend to run out of space. And I think it was partially due to some wrong caching setup. I think I was like sharing caches between different runs with different feature sets. But okay, actually, this is a bigger problem in, for example, Bevy Asset Loader. That's where the problems really come up because Bevy Asset Loader has quite a few features, and I test all the different combinations. In the case of Bevy Game Template, that should actually not be a problem. So there, I think there is a cache, and it works quite well.
Yeah, I guess Rust projects are in general not super cache friendly. The target folder just being gigabytes big. It's that's never great. But it's good to hear that it's in there and tested because that's something that's probably easy to get wrong, and then it's great to have that out of the box when you base it on the game template. The next one sounds interesting when you're in game jams and you work on WebAssembly versions of your game, I guess. Does the CI generate GitHub pages versions of a WebAssembly build for me automatically?
Yes, actually, I skipped that workflow, I think. That's the only workflow not underlined in red. There is this deployed page YAML.
Nice.
And you can trigger it. Well, it's one of the workflows that you can manually trigger, and it will just take the current main branch, make a web build, and then push it to the GitHub pages of this repository. So in the case of Bevy game template, this is something I kind of regularly do. So if you go to the GitHub repository, there is a link also to the GitHub pages of the repository, and there's a deployed version of the template game.
Nice. That's cool. But that's probably something that if you spin off from the template that you have to configure yourself in your fork of it then, right?
You will just have to enable...
Or is it automatically enabled?
I don't think so. It might depend on some account settings on GitHub, I'm not sure. But you can just go to the settings of the repository that you create from the template, then enable GitHub pages, and then you just trigger the workflow.
Yeah, nice.
Actually, I think the order is the other way around, because the workflow creates the branch from which you need to enable GitHub pages. So you trigger the workflow, then you get the branch, and then you enable GitHub pages on that branch.
Oh, okay.
And then you're done.
Got
There's
it.
something in the README about it. I don't know.
Okay, RTFM, cool. Yeah, this is something that sounds familiar. Why did you opt for Kira for audio? Is it superior to Bevy audio?
Okay, yeah, this you have asked me that question a short time ago. Yes, this is at this point I would say it's historical reasons. So both Kira and Bevy game templates are by now a few years old. I feel old talking about this. At the time when I started writing Bevy Kira audio, Bevy audio was absolutely minimal. It had a single function, play. Like you could play an audio file, but you couldn't pause, change volume, loop, or anything else. And I was told to experiment with like what the API of Bevy audio could look like outside of Bevy. So I created a separate audio plugin. That was the beginning of Bevy Kira audio. And that was also around the time I was working on the template. So obviously I wanted to use Bevy Kira audio because I had added things like looping and volume control and so on. Wanted to use it in my games, and I was using the template. So the template uses Bevy Kira audio. By now, I don't think Bevy Kira audio still has huge benefits over Bevy audio. Like Kira has some benefits, but I don't really use them. I'm not a huge audio person, although I do maintain Bevy Kira audio. So at the moment, Bevy audio even has this ECS-centric API, and Bevy Kira audio doesn't have it. While Bevy Kira audio has things like channels, which Bevy audio doesn't have. So you can decide which one to use on your own. There is by now not that big of a difference, I would say, feature-wise. The API is a little bit different at the moment, but that will hopefully change. So if I get to it, the plan is to change the API of Bevy Kira audio to be also more ECS-centric. And there have been some attempts or some started discussions about upstreaming Bevy Kira audio, because there's the still ongoing discussion which audio backend is the best for Bevy. And there seem to be some arguments, at least, in favor of Kira. Yeah, okay. But by that time, if that happens, I don't know if that is going to happen. If that happens, I don't think there's going to be a huge difference in API. So whether you now start something with Bevy audio or with Bevy Kira audio, probably doesn't matter that much.
Shouldn't make a big difference then. Okay, that's good to know. I think this one is regarding the asset loader. Last time I checked, it was not clear if it also supports unloading. Does it?
Okay, it's a good question. So unloading is not something Bevy asset loader would do. Unloading is something the asset server does. So Bevy basically does reference counting on handles on assets. And if there are no strong handles left for an asset, it will unload it. In the case of Bevy Asset Loader, the only place where you will find or where you are expected to use handles to assets is inside this resource. So let me jump back to the this will be the only handle to flying.ogg. So if you remove the resource audio assets, imagine audio assets is only for the first level of your game, and you now go to your second level. Then just remove the resource audio assets, and this will automatically be unloaded by Bevy. So I have an issue open for several years from myself about adding an example for asset loading and unloading.
Yeah.
yeah, that would
Okay,
maybe
but
make it a little
it's
bit
essentially
clearer.
dropping this resource manually.
Yes, and then
That's
Bevy
it.
will unload your asset.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that should be easy enough. But that's a good catch. Is that in the README?
It might be. I can check.
Okay. When to use Bevy game template and when to use other options such as the official GitHub template?
It's a good question. The official GitHub template, I'm not that familiar with, to be honest. I have looked at it, but it has been like quite a while, so I'm not sure how much they have. I think, if I remember correctly, it's a lot more minimal, at least code-wise. As far as I know, it also doesn't support the mobile platforms. I think it just comes with the 3 desktop platforms and web, if I remember correctly. So in this case, Bevy game template is maybe a little bit more complete. I would actually mention another template. So there's Foxtrot. So if you want to do something in 3D, it might be helpful to look at the Foxtrot template, because that one has an example game in 3D and has a couple of crates already integrated that you most likely are going to use in a 3D game. While Bevy game template is a little bit more minimal. I mean, the game that you get with the template really doesn't deserve the name game. It's on purpose kept really, really small, so you can just throw it away and put in your own
I don't
stuff.
know. Have you seen cookie clicker games? I mean, that's not much more.
Oh, I like cookie. Oh, cookie clicker. Cookie clicker is more complex than you think. There's a lot of content in cookie clicker. But no, I get where you're going at. Yeah. Yeah, just Foxtrot might be interesting for you if you do 3D.
That's a good shout out. We should put that in the slide, in the missing further question slide. Okay, the last question is actually something for both of you. So I would give you a last thank you and a virtual round of applause from the audience, and pull up Julian as well, so that you can both have the pleasure to answer this one. Let's see. Hey, Julian.
Hi.
Both of you work with Bevy for a while. How hard is it to upgrade between releases?
Well,
I mean, you have a lot of content out there, Niklas, in terms of crates. Sorry, Julian. And you with your gaming project will probably suffer similar issues. So, Julian, take it away.
On my side, I think answered part of the question, but I think it depends on the scope. And for the moment, my game doesn't have much in terms of scope. It's focused on animations, cameras, and input management. So I would say that I didn't see any big impact. I just try to keep up with the releases, and that's all for me. I didn't have any big issue in upgrading.
But you pointed out in your presentation that it's it's not the first time that I hear that your approach is to try to keep your dependencies minimalistic, right? And I'm wondering what's the because obviously that's kind of a shame in the end. We have such a great ecosystem of crates out there. So if someone watching this is wondering, okay, what now? Should I use all of this? There's so much amazing stuff. Doesn't it make my life easier? So what do you think we as a community behind the engine can do to improve that situation?
Well, I think it's inherent to plugins, so I don't know, to be honest, what we could do. And the Rust ecosystem is always in 0 point something, so we don't have much stable versions, I think. Sometimes we should, but Rustaceans are like this. But yeah, I don't know, to be honest, because that's what it is. Bevy is quite young, and we are learning and at the same time implementing a lot of different stuff. So I think it's the drawback of having a game engine that is at the very beginning. And I think if you want something that is very stable and easy to use, go for Unity, Unreal, maybe Godot. But Well, Bevy, without talking about pricing, right? I mean,
Or
it
a lot
just
of other things.
if you want to learn maybe just the very basics, Unity is fine. But if you want to learn how to do real game development, how it works under the hood, then you not only use APIs, but you see how you can develop a feature. So that's what I like. But the drawback is you will have to maintain stuff and yeah, upgrade and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Moving fast, breaking things, right?
Yeah.
Niklas, what's
You should
your
expect it.
experience with that?
Well, Bevy game template itself only has two dependencies, like Bevy plugin dependencies, and I'm the maintainer of both of them. So for Bevy game template, it's not that hard. Like I don't usually only have that problem when I was too slow updating the other two plugins. But these plugins actually have some dependencies, and yes, it has happened a couple of times that I then maintain my own forks of some other plugins and just open pull requests for new Bevy versions and try to update my own against that custom fork. I think, like, for me personally, I mean, I like doing this kind of work, so I'm okay with it at the moment. I think that the way that Bevy is currently handling new versions is actually quite good, right? We want to move fast. We do want to break things and learn new things and iterate on the APIs. That's a positive thing, I think, at least this early on, while things are not really settled. But there have been quite a couple of discussions, actually, the last few versions about how to improve this. And as far as I remember, the next time we're going to have some kind of release candidate. I don't know whether it's going to be like an official one or not, but as far as I remember, there's going to be like a ping to the developers. Now, like, consider this commit kind of something you can start updating against. So there's going to be a little bit of runway for people who maintain plugins so they have more time, because some people really maintain many crates and don't have enough time then to update fast. And then there's a bunch of people waiting for it. This can generate quite some stress. So I think it's good if we can minimize this.
Yeah. Speaking of which, do you know, are you aware if there's some similar template to yours for Bevy plugin authors? Because that would be, for example, something that I imagine would be quite helpful if it would run against some Bevy master all the time to basically put it in your face that it's currently not compatible with whatever will be eventually a release.
No, I'm not aware of that. Do you now mean really a GitHub template project for Bevy plugins, or were you now talking about some automatic CI to test against main?
I mean, basically both, like a template that contains the CI like yours automatically for when I want to start some open source Bevy plugin, which automatically makes sure that this is also, I don't know, nightly running against a Bevy master branch, something like that. Because it's sort of a best practice I see in a lot of plugins to have a tag release for that matches a certain Bevy version, and master usually or sometimes try to go with the Bevy master, right? In case you have to, in case your project makes it necessary that you have to go to Bevy master.
Yeah, I do not do that automatically because I think it would generate a lot of noise. Like at the moment, it would definitely fail, but I don't want to update now to Bevy 014 because on the way there, maybe some things get changed again that I would have to update in between to get the CI green. So I just tend to do this like in the weeks upcoming to a release, and then it's a manual process for me.
Yeah, gotcha. So that's but that still leaves the original question out there, like how much breakage did you observe over the last years and releases between Bevy releases? Let's not talk about the plugins there.
It really depends on the version. So some of them were very simple, like a search and replace through the whole repository, and like 2-3 search and replace, and the whole thing was updated. Then there were some significantly bigger ones. So mostly the ECS updates, I think, were quite breaking. So when the system sets were completely redone, or the way that you register systems changed. But all in all, I would say it's usually rather fast. Like the first one is like when you start looking into it, it might be a little bit slow. But what I tend to do is I open the migration guide that is usually by then already like at least in work, if not public. So you can just open the pull request for the migration guide, go through that once, and then you will learn to spot all the things that you're supposed to change. And then usually it's rather fast. I don't think I spent much time on this usually. Maybe like an hour or two for everything. And with the dependencies of my plugins, I usually have to do like 5, 6 great updates or so maybe. Okay.
Well, we are actually running out of questions here. That's a first, and we are not even at 3 hours yet, so that's great for the audience. But that also leaves us with maybe some headroom for a few like freestyle questions. Is there anything that you guys want to talk about after watching each other's talk?
I'm just amazed at looking at 3D animations. I can't do this myself, but it looks very nice.
Yeah, that's a lot of pain too. By the way, there is this. I was doing a live stream, and someone who was watching was using or tried to use Oz animation. There is something in Rust to adapt it, so it might also
Can you elaborate what that is?
Yep, I'm just sharing the link in the chat. Oh, it does fail to post. I don't know why. Okay, can you maybe type OZZ animation array? So I don't know, but this is an adaptation. Sorry, an adaptation of OZZ, which is a way to create animations, and you have inverse schematic. So when you want to create procedural animations, for example, or you will have blending, animation blending and stuff like this. So this is like a set of tools to make animations, and there is a crate in Rust to just make an adaptation for Bevy. But I don't know if I can share a link. I wanted, but I was rejected.
Yeah, maybe this is some anti-spam thing. You can send it to me and I will share it.
Yep.
So we asked Julian already what kind of project he's working on. Niklas, you're maintaining so many crates. Do you still have time for working on an actual game, or is it just tooling that excites you?
I don't have a big game project or anything like that. I tend to jump projects a little bit too much. So I did some other projects a little bit outside of Bevy. I mean, I have one thing, for example, I built like a static site generator, which is still using Bevy ECS, so a little bit in Bevy still. But at the moment, I'm doing something completely else. But yeah, in general, I think I would still like to write games, definitely. So I am planning to join the game jam or maybe some game jams in the future. Definitely the next Bevy jam. I will try to.
Do you know when it is? Just as a quick shout out for the audience.
Should be next version again, right? I think it's every second version. We didn't have a gem for 013, so 014 should have one. So usually like 1 or 1.5 months after the initial release. So everybody has enough time to update and we have enough time for bug fixes in the engine.
Yeah, nice. So you mentioned game jams before. So you worked on games then for jams before in Bevy. What was the what would you say was an outstanding aspect of Bevy using Bevy for it instead of another engine?
So my reason why I started with Bevy initially was just that it's Rust. I wanted to learn Rust. I wanted to use Rust. I was learning Rust, and looking at Bevy, it was just a lot of fun to work with. I stuck with it because I really like the code that you can write with Bevy. I really like ECS for game development. I think that this kind of dependency injection, that kind of pattern that you get for systems is really nice to work with. And the kind of API that you can write with it also in plugins, like the kind of API that Bevy Asset Loader has, I really have a lot of fun designing it or working on it, working with it. So I think this is why I stuck around mostly.
Yeah, yeah. That's super interesting because I'm reaching out to a lot of people in the community in the course of this meetup, and there's basically people like you that want to find something to build games in Rust because they love Rust. But I also it's kind of funny because there's also a bunch of people that come to Rust because of Bevy, because they're looking for like such a deeply ECS driven game engine that most inevitably they come up with Bevy at some point. And then they might have heard about Rust before or not, but they actually go into it then because of how appealing Bevy is for them. So I find that super interesting.
I've made the experience.
Some people use it for other stuff, like creating a synthesizer or, a dashboard for the car. That's quite surprising.
Yeah.
Not only games.
Niklas, what did you want to say?
Yeah, I've made the experience that a couple times at my workplace, I've actually done like workshops using Bevy. And I've made the experience there that Bevy is actually excellent to learn Rust. So it's nice to hear this, because Bevy, if you write like a little game, you don't have to care about many of the more complicated parts of Rust, right? There are no lifetimes in your code. You don't have, you don't have any weird types mostly. Yeah, I mean, there's no mutex around, at least not in your code. The Bevy game code itself will look quite harmless. And I've made really good experience with that. So it's fun to hear that people actually come to Bevy without any Rust knowledge. I hope they have a good time.
Yeah. Then you haven't built big enough systems yet, because as soon as you have to go parameter set or param set, I think you
Okay.
are off to the races. And then suddenly it's like, what the hell is this? And I agree, Bevy will hide a lot of those typical Rust intricacies for a long time, which actually I agree makes it a great entrance to the language.
Like at least a game of the size of a game jam. So if you have like a day or two, you don't run into those things.
Yeah, probably. Julian, what were your past Bevy projects before the voxel game?
Well, I was trying to do some procedural generation for an hexagonal map, but I stopped. It was just a lot of work, to be honest, and I wanted something a bit more visual. It's just easier to share with the community, and then I just switched to voxel art and try to make a game with it. So yep, that's just this project, I think. I didn't try much. I tried at some point to do a 2D game where you control a boat. But since I love to just set up cameras, I was mostly hacking cameras and trying to get a smooth transition when you move the boat. And yeah, that's mostly what I did.
And you mentioned other engines like Unity. Is there anything that you would choose another engine for these days?
Well, I don't know. I started with Unity, but it was C#, very near from Java, and that's why I was using it at the beginning. It was quite user friendly. But since I invested in Rust, I thought that Bevy was the right choice. And so there is now a foundation, and I think the community is nice. And Unity, I was a bit disappointed by the fact that the entity component system for Unity was completely broken multiple times. So I wanted to learn about this methodology, how to organize your entities and components, and it was very difficult with Unity. A lot of API changes. It was in preview, so I wasn't really happy. So that's why I switched to Bevy, and because I was investing in Rust. But if I should switch to something else, it would be, I think, good for the community aspect, and apparently can also do some Rust. So that's
that would be my next question. Did you look into the Rust bindings? Is that what you would use?
Yeah, I think I will start by there.
Okay.
Because I have already the skills to write some Rust, so that's what I would do. But I didn't try.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, I heard the other day a quite interesting comparison when when people are talking about Bevy not having an editor and all, right? I mean, last time I believe, or at least for a while, Unity, if you wanted to go the ECS route, you also didn't have an editor, because all of that was basically then code only. So we are not too far from that then.
But I think we don't necessarily need a scene viewer and stuff like this. What I would like to have in my game would be a switch mode. I already have a switch mode between dev and player mode, but I would like to have, this drop-down panel where you can just search for an item, something like this, and it will just open a UI, and you drop the item directly in your game, and then you can save the current view of the game. I think it's way more efficient, and you're directly in the game, so you have all the events. But I think people are just used to this scene coming from Unreal and Unity, so I know that people are investing time in this scene view, as we saw in the meetup last time. But but yeah, I would like to experiment with a direct game view where you can just drop stuff, 3D models, animations.
Yeah, that's interesting. And then when you talk about an entity, you probably talk about the whole like big configuration of one, right? With like what Unity would call a prefab, I assume, that you want to drop into scenes then. Yeah. Which you probably still need an editor for then.
Yeah, but you can use Blender. I was trying last time, and you have Blender and the blueprints crates for Bevy, which is the equivalent of prefab. And yeah, you can just spawn something with this. If you connect Blender to Bevy, it works. I think it would be a good first step.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I never managed to learn Blender, so that might be a good reason then. So since there's no other question coming in, I would ask the last question to both of you. Maybe Niklas, you want to start. What would be the number one thing you want to see in Bevy in the future, which you think is missing, like the priority one for you? And then also what makes 014 exciting to you? And the animation graph is not allowed, Julian.
Also not for me.
Okay, come on.
I would pick it then. No, it's actually the only bigger feature that I'm aware of in 014 at the moment. So yeah, I would pick that still. What I want to see in Bevy. To be honest, everything I've ever needed in my small little game jam games has been there. I'm perfectly happy with code only. I'm not missing an editor really at all. Then if I do, I can just get the dependency in that gives me these drop-down windows where I can, look into the ECS world. It's a one-liner, right? So yeah, never miss that really.
Okay.
And other than that, I mean, what I would like is that the engine has more standard procedure for getting cross-platform built. So at the moment, this is really a lot of work to configure every platform right, especially for the mobile platforms. So it would be nice if that path will get a little bit smoother and easier. But like from the engine features, since I move mostly in 2D, not in 3D, there's not much missing for me. I think in 3D, there's still a lot of features that are planned and being worked on. And
yeah. Okay. Julian.
Yeah, I was trying to unmute. On my side, I don't know if it will be in the next release, but there is this PC app shadow filtering, and it wasn't available for point lights. It was available for general shadows, but now with the point light, you will be able to have a good shadow. And I think this is the kind of stuff I would like to see for 3D. Everything that other game engines have, like managing shadows. It's really important when you have a 3D world to get good shadow casting and good light. And I think it's actively being worked. So I'm happy with it. But in terms of feature, that's all. Currently, I'm still experimenting, so I don't know much what what I will need next. For the moment, I'm just well, playing with animations. Next would be to load the assets, and each time I need something, there is a plugin or someone who did something. Even the state machine for animations, someone already tried something. So because it's open source, it just opens a lot of possibilities. So that's good. For the moment, I don't have any blocker, to be honest. And even the input manager, the Livestream input manager, was really a very nice crate to use, very nice API. I was really surprised, and it was easier than what I had in Unity to manage the controller. So that's the kind of stuff that I think is really promising for Bevy. And since it's open source, I don't have any issue to think that we will get all the different plugins and implementation we need, and some will be ported in the official version. So that's a really cool way to approach, I think, development.
Yeah.
Now
I
that
agree.
Now that I see the chat, though, I remember one thing: UI. I am really looking forward to better UI. So somebody wrote round buttons. I don't care much about round buttons specifically, but spawning menus in general or just other kinds of UI shouldn't be so boilerplatey and difficult. So I'm really looking forward to that improving a lot, and I think it will, because now that focus goes on an editor, we will need all the widgets, and that should make things a lot better.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Which, by the way, when you try to use Bevy UI, you would definitely, I'm not sure if you will still keep your stance of everything in code is fine, because that's a load of iteration and recompilation there. Unless you are breathing Flexbox, probably, then you don't have to try out as much things as I have to.
Yeah,
like, is it just justify? Is it align items, justify items, or what was it again?
Yeah, for that, it's quite nice to just have this eGUI plugin in and just change the values on the fly.
Yeah,
you can.
Yeah,
that's then your editor, and that's in those cases, that's enough of an editor, really.
Yeah, that's a good point. Although I must say I definitely missed the fact that the editor is decoupled from the actual game view, because especially when you iterate on UI and you want it to be reactive in terms of size, and then you have this gigantic eGUI inspector on top of your UI that is supposed to have the aspect ratio of an iPhone, then you have no game left anymore. So you inevitably make your window huge, and then all the reactivity, basically, if you have it, will make it look not as much as you expect anymore. So I don't know if there's, I actually wanted to look if there's some like remote debugging inspector UI out there, because that would be kind of helpful then, or spawning a separate window for the inspector GUI to have that somewhere else. That would be nice, so that I can have the original window in the constant size.
I think the window part, I read something that might be supported, actually.
Okay.
The other thing, it might be possible to just have your UI in a scene, right? Does that not yet work? Or I never tried. I mean, my UI was usually so minimal that I didn't even think about it. I just have like 2 menu buttons or so.
You mean in the scene file?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if
then
that's.
You could just edit the scene file. It gets hot reloaded.
I don't. I last time I talked to someone about that, they mentioned it is. It's probably going to be hard, because it's even though you might only care for a handful of properties, there is a load of properties in there. It's going to be a huge scene file if you export it raw.
That might be
but
true.
yeah, I agree. It's actively worked on, and I think we are very aware that this needs to be improved to be able to have a decent Bevy editor. Okay, cool. Thanks to you both for your awesome presentations, and thanks to the viewers out there for the interesting questions and the great conversations that come out of it. I'm super happy always to have this and hear from people like you that are actually working hands-on with the editor, with the engine, or with the ecosystem of it. So this is always super interesting. And a little shout out to everyone in the stream. If you have a topic that you want to present or talk about, or if you know someone that you would like to see here present, then please reach out to me on Discord or wherever. I'm really curious and always looking for new content for this. So thank you guys. I think we will call it a day. That was probably the shortest meetup so far, but also very refreshing. Okay, guys. Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.